in Christianity, if the world doesn't matter and the earth is going to get destroyed, what is it to me that the world perceive me a sinner or a saint? It's not a question of whether or not I'm a sinner or a saint, or if I'm closer to being a saint. See, the world has this perception that there are saints in the world, and the truth of the matter is that according to the Bible, nobody's a saint. That's probably one of the foremost biggest errors of the Catholic Church is sainting people that shouldn't have been sainted, possibly. A lot of people would agree on sainting somebody, but that assumes that somebody's not a sinner, okay? Everybody's a sinner. The difference between someone who's been baptized and someone who hasn't in Christ is that there's forgiveness for your sins. It doesn't mean you don't sin. It just means that you are forgiven and you're trying to do better. And the sad thing is that some people think that it means that they can behave badly, and that includes me. But everybody does that. There are some people that will probably use the religion to justify really evil acts, and their heart is not in it. They're only using it to manipulate the other people who believe in Jesus, okay? There's a song that They Might Be Giants put out called, it said, what was it? Mr. Jesus is not so far, is so far away. So you love me as much as I love me. I'm built in little empire from the crazy stuff called the blood of the exploited working class. There's shouting in my highness and kiss me, son of God. That's what it was. And so there's probably something a television evangelist might sing. But the thing is that how I behave with respect to how God wants me to behave and how I'm perceived by the world are two totally different things. It does matter how the world perceives you if it's going to attract people to Christ. It probably could lead people away, and I would have no way of knowing one way or another. And Jesus says, who is not gathering with me scatters. And so the intent is that you're attracting people to Jesus. And I think I do that to some extent by elaborating on Jesus's preachings and things. And the reason why I misbehave and misperform, to me, I justify it this way. It keeps me from having a big ego. It's self-deprecation, so I'll sit there and talk about masturbation and porn like it's something great. There is greatness in everything, to some degree. There is a small percentage. I don't know what's great about bombing Ukraine, but there might be something in it that would enable something that wouldn't have been possible without it. And people think that unfathomable, but God has the perception of seeing many years in the future. I mean, practically to infinity. I mean, if you have absolute intelligence. You have the capacity to see all possible futures. What's the point in going through time? And so there's no such thing as predestination. God, whatever you do, God will reorganize all the paths for everybody, for everything, for all happenings, so that you end up, so that He can persuade you to go down the right path. Okay? That's my belief. And so I don't believe in predestination, because I believe that God has infinite wisdom, because it says in the Bible. And because when you have infinite wisdom, you have infinite prediction. And it's not just seeing one possible future, it's seeing all of them. And that's a serious problem for somebody who might have the capacity to see the future. They might be seeing a possible future that is a hopeful of the devil. And using that false future might actually lead somebody down the wrong path. So it's because it also says that the knowledge of man is foolishness. And it's just like people want to go to Mars and they're not considering all the challenges there of going to Mars, and why would you want to go to Mars? And I would say the litmus test is if we can't go to live on the bottom of the depths of the ocean, why go to Mars? Because nobody knows what it's like down at the bottom of the ocean. And it's like a completely different world, okay? So why not go to the bottom of the ocean? I mean, if we ruin the atmosphere with nuclear waste and use up all the resources, what's the potential that we've got more resources at the bottom of the ocean floor and we could survive down there? I mean, that's kind of like the video game, what is it, BioShock, where Frank, what's his name, ends up building this entire empire underneath in the ocean. And this game explores that all of the scientific discoveries and experiments, and just like something out of Firefly, or was it Serenity, just like something out of that series of that genre of sci-fi. What caused the crazy people, I forgot what they're called, the Reavers or whatever, I don't remember what their names were. The crazy people, they're the rabid people. What it was is it was a utopian society that had used a gas that they assumed would maintain people's solitude, but instead had a profound side effect that led them to become these rabid creatures, violent creatures. Sorry, I did the plot spoiler there. I'll probably put it up on the title, but you'll see it if you see the movie about Firefly. The thing that was to make up for the fact that they couldn't continue making more seasons of it because there wasn't a large enough fan base or whatever it was, or that the actors had other things they wanted to do and had no time to continue with. So, but that was what happened in BioShock. But then, I'm reeling out of my little recursive thinking process here, where I'm going down into, anyhow, what I was really starting with was that it is the only people that are going to listen to me are the people that agree with the truths or that I'm assuming, or the opinion are assuming and thinking and are trying out and finding that's mostly what I say is true, and some of the stuff I'm just mistaken, or and I'll say a lot of it I haven't researched. Some of it comes from assumptions, and that's part of being a good coder, is making some assumptions, because you don't have the capacity to know what's in someone else's library or code. These things called libraries, and what they are is they're functions that other people wrote, but when they make the source, in order to sell it, they have to compile it to an executable format, and that's for efficiency, for ease of use, and it's also to permit them to sell it, because if they gave you the source code, you would run with it, share it with your friends, and then there would be nothing for us to sell. See? But in the future, I've proposed that artificial intelligence, deep learning, could be used to reverse engineer, or to decode executables back into multiple forms of source code, so that somebody could read it and make sense of it. Because a Java, for instance, when you compile it, doesn't turn into executable source. What it does is it turns into a tokenized format of Java, and then they remove the symbolic table. So they replace all the meaningful names that people would give their variables with like A1, A2, A3, A4, A5. And then it's up to you as the coder, if you decode the Java from the tokenized format back into source code, which is really easy, you would have to be left with the problem of figuring out what all the variables are and renaming them. But business people don't know this, and Java coders do know it, and it's one of those little white lies that they would tell their business administrators. But the advantage of tokenizing it is that for sure some other coder is not going to waste their time to really learn your source code base so that they can rename all those variables, unless they're going to get really intimate with your source code, and then you can start offering them a position at your company, and they'll probably accept. Or they may even buy up your company, because they look at your source code that's generated from your tokenized format and find it to be extremely valuable, and then they give you an offer, and you might take that, So there's pros and cons to everything, and but whenever you're using somebody else's libraries or software, you don't really have the capacity to know everything about what you're doing or what's going on. You're not going to go down and read the intricacies of their assembly language to actually figure out what they're doing, unless you're a complete lunatic and you don't value your time all that much. Or you think that you're so much hot stuff that you can do shit like that, and want to show everybody that you're a wizard and an egotist, and they'll probably kick you out of the company because you're an egotist. It just, to me, it doesn't make sense to go in and read assembly language. I mean, read machine code. Of course, you have to turn it to assembly, which is the human readable form. Nobody codes in machine code unless, of course, they're a complete lunatic or they're autistic, and they can tell and they can actually see any binary code in assembly whenever they're looking at the machine code. So for them, there's no difference, because they can see all the ones and zeros as being, or hexadecimal codes as being this command or that command, and that they have to use when they're using a command that has several operands, that they have to use a certain amount of extra bytes in order to, or if they're using little endian or big endian formats of the bytes, that they're going to have to reorient to the information in this way. And I mean, humans are fallible. Even autistic people are fallible, and so I wouldn't trust such people. I would rather have everything in source code than to dig up and dig into the assembly, because if you're working with an abstraction that's well written, assuming it's well written, well tested, then you're going to save time by not having to get into the details. The only time the details matter is when efficiency matters, and you and you don't trust anyone, and you're all about security, and you need to establish absolute trust and security to the point to where you don't fear that you know that anything that bad might happen is that you at least did your best. Okay. So anyhow, I'm going to take some domains and put them up for sale, only because it's a thing that I consider to be fun. There's a passage in the Bible that says, "Give to a man what his works are worth," and that's kind of what Mayo did. And Mayo Clinic, I don't remember his full name. That's what he did whenever he would offer his surgical services to people, is he would determine what he was to be paid based upon the income bracket of the person that he was dealing with. And if the person was homeless, he wouldn't demand anything of them, because you don't demand the shirts off someone's back. You don't want to leave somebody naked in the street. And so in such cases, and he was agnostic, I think. He was an atheist, he was agnostic. And so I think he was agnostic. And so it's atheistic I would have a hard time with, because it wouldn't give you much benefit to being a good Samaritan, or to, if you were concerned about your welfare. I mean, what would you think about treating somebody nicely? Is it that they would come back and reward you? And if you were expecting of that of them, how would you treat them if they did not deliver on what you expected of them? If you expected of them, if you're that weak, it would be much stronger to assume that the Lord will provide, and so that God will provide, or that a higher power will provide. And the closer to the belief that there's a grand creator, the closer you get to that, the better, because to assume this is all an accident is to also assume that it's not, that it was designed imperfectly. I mean, why aren't we fish? Why are we humans? Why aren't we fish? Did this take millions of years to determine what the proper configuration of a living being was? Did we control our attributes? Why don't we have 4 eyes, then 2 eyes? Or why don't we have 6 eyes? Why don't we have the capacity to absolute perception? Why can't we read each other's minds? There's so many what ifs and why not and all that. And there are some people that don't like to ask those questions, and for them it's a whole lot easier not to ask them. And they think that it's stupid to think that you know it. And the truth is nobody knows it. But if you think about somebody who practices a religion, they're compensating for what are the failings of the human condition by overestimating their tolerance and comfort, forgiving people more than becoming an absolute jerk and asshole. Somebody who is at extremes all the time because they're extremely paranoid and they've got so many they have so many ideas about what reality is that it drives them crazy, okay? And that could be said about somebody of a religion if they take it to extremes. But that's the thing is that to assume that you can judge somebody else's worldview and, you know, and to assess its relevance, it's dangerous for me to go into other people's worldviews because I really don't know how it serves them, the religion serves them, and I don't, there could be some perfectly good reasons for why they accept the religion they did, and I even though I'm really judgmental of Catholicism, and the only reason why is because I know what the Bible says, and Catholicism it seems like it was a nice go-between for somebody that was, like, say, into witchcraft or voodoo or something, that they still needed to have these effigies and, these idols or whatever around them. They if you're into pantheism and you have multiple gods, and how I see it with pantheism is you're worshiping all these gods because you're trying to avoid catastrophes. And if the catastrophe occurs in the particular area where you're worshiping a god that deals with that particular area of your life, then you're going to go and seek out the people in your community who didn't, and then you're going to blame them. And that's the reason why Stevie Wonder wrote that song, Superstition, is because it has the tendency to control people. The devil's on his way. And I've got superstitions, but it's because I took statistics, and I am reasonably sure that statistically there's no way that these numbers that I'm seeing could be a chance happening. But I have really good pattern matching skills, and that's probably the reason why I see them. And it may be a challenge that's being presented to me to see if I can get past the, even though it might be an actual controlled occurrence. It may be a test to see if I can avoid or my concern for them and continue to behave consistently without being sensitive to them to the point of being paranoid. Like people that just don't want to see the number 666. Even though I looked it up in Wikipedia and they said that in the Hebrew it was misinterpreted that the number was really 616. So misinterpretations could get in the way of what, and and where that number comes from is, it comes from Revelations, right? And there's still a bit of, it's still a controversial subject whether Revelations is even relevant, because they don't really know who wrote Revelations. And they assume it was John. It was a guy named John, but they don't know if it is the Apostle John. And there is a capacity for people to assume it's the Apostle John because Jesus alluded that John wouldn't die, because John was the apostle Jesus most loved. And and he made the statement that, what is it to me that John doesn't die, or something like that, And so then there are a lot of people that assume John's still alive, and it may not have been the case that Jesus was just saying that he would die by natural causes, but he shouldn't. What was it to him? And so it's probably completely up to John, whereas the other apostles carried with them to the grave their special abilities, and there's still people that think that they can speak in tongues. They'll go out in churches and speak gibberish, and somehow their gibberish is converting people that came to the church that were from another land. So they assume if they're in church and they start talking this gibberish, that they might have the gift of speaking in tongues, that it will communicate something to somebody else in the church, that or to those foreigners. And they start, and that's possibly true, and you can't really refute it. It's just one of those beliefs that people have out there. And it's probably dangerous to refute whether Catholicism is bad, because, at least somebody is kind of on the same wavelength. But I really do not believe in hierarchies, that hierarchies can actually work, because it's the best we can do, I guess, for forming organizations. But when a priest is abusing children, or when somebody of the faith is abusing children, having sexual relations with them, these priests or these popes need to realize that these people that they've brought into their practice might be potential psychopaths or sociopaths. And the only reason they're in the church is because they know they have the capacity to be with children. I mean, they could be pedophiles. And they, it's like, where in the world am I going to get access to the most children? In what profession? And they might be completely driven by that. How in the world are you going to change them over if you give them full access to that stuff? And, how are you going to change their attraction or their behavior? And it says in the Bible, it says to cause one of these little ones to sin, it'd be better to throw them in the. This was a verse that I completely misunderstood until I read it again, and I was like, oh, well, that's not what I thought it meant, But to cause somebody to sin, it's better to throw them in the. And that could happen to me, just saying stuff to get people in the audience, even though I'm well-meaning. I think the thing that really matters is if you cause somebody to sin knowingly, without proper discouragement and all sorts of things, that this is me and this is not you, and I'm making this bad judgment call and things like that. That's probably a bit better than going into something and saying, I know the absolute truth, and I'm not wrong, and I'm always right, and things like that, which some people are open to, and some people, I mean, the conservative party is completely open to believing that Trump is still a good guy, and because they're afraid to judge him, because some of them believe that if you judge people, it's a bad thing to judge other people, and you don't know Trump's complete story. But it also says in the Bible that if a tree bears bad fruits, the tree is bad. And I mean, if you're not aware of that, and you believe in Christ, and you think Trump's okay, and he's still quoting from the Bible. Even Putin's quoting from the Bible. And Putin's bombing Ukraine. He's lying to his own people. And Trump called Putin a genius, which Trump probably thinks is an excellent. There's no telling what's going through Trump's mind. It could be that Putin has dirt on him and he just doesn't want to piss Putin off. It could be that he's thinking that Putin might, when Putin gets to be more powerful, that Putin gives him, it's like Lex Luthor in Superman 2, negotiating with the three super people, Commander Zod, or whatever his name was, negotiating parts of the world that he would want to have access to, which is, Lex Luthor thinking really foolishly. But that's what the thirst for power leads people to, is this perception that somehow they can get some favor, and in that they're going to get treated well whenever they're just going to be manipulated even more, and they just really realize that they're subject to somebody else, and they no longer have any freedom. So to negotiate with a madman or with somebody that has great power but very little forgiveness is going to be a serious blunder. And so there are these Christians out there that think Trump's an okay guy, and I don't know what is wrong with them, because Trump is unapologetic. He makes fun of people, just like Rush Limbaugh made fun of people. He made fun of the Chinese. I've probably made fun of people, and I probably put it on my stream, but it's one of those things you kind of have to look after. And the thing is not to demonize somebody, but not to believe somebody's completely going to hell, but to realize that it's easy for us to assume that other people are more evil than thou, whenever we don't have the capacity to see all of the extent, the ripple effect that we produce as a result of our own sin. And so my capacity to satisfy God is, in my mind, is certainly completely skewed with respect to God, I'm sure. But God, I would hope, would be able to see something in me that would give God hope that for my direction towards the right things, the things which God holds necessary. Not necessarily totally necessary, but a step in the right direction, okay? And then hope that we also are forgiving of other people to that degree, and to also see that even though we can see somebody else as not being perfect, that we're not going to are not going to use it as a justification to treat them poorly. That's a challenge that I have before me, because I have a tendency to say people are stupid. And the truth of the matter is everybody's stupid, because nobody has the absolute perception. And if we did, we wouldn't sin, but we wouldn't have the capacity to make mistakes if we had absolute perception. So if you're marching towards a world where everybody has the capacity to read each other's thoughts, or to communicate via a telepathy digital link like people want of what's his name, the guy who made Tesla. So they look at him, and then they assume that they're going to be able to read other people's brain. If he did that, then what's your capacity for failure? Or I mean, there's some serious problems there. You wouldn't have your own individual thoughts. It would be like something out of the Borg and Star Trek. You would have no private thoughts. You would have no individuality. You would be questioned, and there would be a little forgiveness, because there would be assumed absolute perception. And for absolute perception, one of the big concerns is consistency. Proficiency and behavior and consistency. Consistent behavior. Proficiency in consistent behavior. That would be an absolute concern if you had extra perceptive abilities. People would be less forgiving, because they would be pointing out that you should have known ahead of time. And there can be people that will do that with religion. There are people that can do that with science. There are people that can do that with pretty much anything. And all you need is something like the Ten Commandments to point out that nobody's perfect, because everybody's done at least one of those. Bear false witness, to disobey your parents' wishes, or then to commit adultery. Everybody has done at least one of those, and if anybody has done it, there is no capacity for them to reach righteousness. And to assume that they have complete righteousness is to assume that they're godlike, and then you have people that become egotists, and guys like Pharaoh that was inbred, because supposedly if you were to touch Pharaoh, you would immediately disintegrate. So to be protective of his people, Pharaoh had to breed within his family, and at least that's something I heard. And the problem with breeding within a family, then to have sex with your own family members or of your own kin, it breeds genetic deformities, and it doesn't produce better lives. It produces people with genetic vulnerability to disease. You're encouraging the capacity for someone to be, you're encouraging the capacity for eliminating an entire line of a generation of a complete line of generations, a complete family line in one complete, within a month, let's say. So you could eliminate every Trump that has ever lived by using some disease that attacks the genetic code of Trump. And I'm sure there's probably somebody that might be working on that, or with Putin. All they have to do is collect a hair of Putin, and then they just can create a disease that attacks Putin, and then put it in the air, and Putin just comes down being sick. That's maybe what they're working on, for all I know. But, even though it sounds like I'm a dangerous person, and in some degrees it probably is, and it's possible that I've put this out, I'm possibly in a metaphysical sandbox because of the potential that I could ruin people's ability to operate, given a lot of the ideas I have. Or somebody will pop up and say, no, we've already thought of that one, I mean, 3 or 4 trillion possibilities, and, that was still coming out this way, and oh man. Okay. So I was about to fall asleep there. I've been mowing today, and I'm really dozy. So I want to sing today, but I need to upload some VR 180 content I created the other day. And what I'm wanting to sing, and I probably already sung it, is Symbolic Gags. And it won't happen on this channel. It'll happen on my Kieran Holland channel, the one that's got close to 6K subscribers right now. And it seems like what everybody wants is for me to sing. So in order to be fair to them, I'm going to try to put all my philosophical stuff on this channel, and which is completely counterintuitive, because this channel is called RockMeAmadeus, and the other one's just me. And so I don't know, because RockMeAmadeus is a reference to my music website. So maybe if you come to this site and you like my philosophy, you'll like music. That doesn't sound right. So maybe I'll flip it over. But maybe whenever my other channel hits 10K, I'll tell all my member base to switch over to this one, because then I would make this one the music, and then I'd go up to the other one and use that as my philosophy source. And then people would be using both information resources, and one for the old music that I delivered, and the other for the new music that I deliver. But I don't want to mix the two, because I understand that the member base on that one, I don't think it is not. It's going to be a small minority of the people that listen, that like my music and my philosophy. So, and yeah. Whoa. Okay. See you later.